Welcome to The Record Show, your virtual spin around the vinyl industry. Brought to you by Radio Wasteland Records. Yes, Midland has a record store. Here's your host, Jim Gleason.
Well, greetings from the Wasteland and welcome to another edition of The Record Show. And we have got a great one headed your way today. We'll check in with Ken Norton from Ingram Entertainment on what's shaping up to be a stellar-looking week for new releases. We'll answer a viewer comment and count down my top 10 albums of all time. And we'll get medieval with a rock and roll guitar god. But before all that, we're going to turn things over to Heather with a closer look at a new release from a heavy metal icon.
Hey everybody, I'm Heather from the Wasteland, and Jim asked me if I would talk a little bit about Motörhead and Lemmy. This new release is called Live to Win, and it is an album that was released to celebrate the life and legacy of our boy Lemmy Kilmister. So it is a pretty cool compilation of covers, mostly covers. Actually, there's one Motörhead track. It's a song, it's Overkill, which we've all heard before, but this is an exclusive version to this release only. So that's kind of special because we all love that song. Also on here is an awesome cover of Metallica's Nothing Else Matters, produced by the wonderful Rat Scabies from The Damned, which I thought was kind of a neat little sidebar. What else? It's a Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll. That is pretty cool. Now that's a Lemmy cover. So there's different covers on here. We've got some Motörhead tracks. We've got some Lemmy tracks. So The Long Way to the Top is a Lemmy track. Another one would be Tie Your Mother Down, which I thought was kind of a neat little extra coming in here. Kind of a deep cut for Queen. Lemmy and the Upsetters, though, is a neat little side thing on here. Lemmy and the Upsetters is just Lemmy and a guy named Mick Green, who was sort of a house musician, basically, was a house musician for all kinds of acts. They were buddies. They had a little project called Lemmy and the Upsetters and did a cover of Elvis's Blue Suede Shoes. That is on here, as well as the backing track for that 12-inch, which was called Paradise. What else is on here? Cover of Desire, Breaking the Law by Judas Priest, which I'm pretty sure is enough reason to buy the record all in of itself.
Breaking the law, 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 breaking the law. So much for the golden future, I can't even start.
So this is a pretty special limited edition vinyl release to get for Motörhead and for Lemmy fans everywhere. Released on Cleopatra Records. It comes in red, blue, and neon pink vinyl, which is pretty much, a reason to get it if there ever was one. All limited edition, so get them now while you can. I'm not sure what else there is to say. Motörhead fans, it's a must-have. Thanks.
Time to check in once again with our friend Ken Norton from Ingram Entertainment and get ourselves caught up on all of the new releases. Ken, hope you're doing okay, sir. You're a little under, but plowing through, right?
That's right. How are you, Joe?
We're doing well up here. Thanks. Got a big week this week for some new releases. So what do we have? The major highlights, please.
We sure do. Lana Del Rey has a brand new record. It's called Kim Trails Over the Country Club. It's a proper new music record. Her last one was a spoken word thing. But this is the new studio album that people have been waiting on. That she's had recorded for quite some time. Put off putting out because she couldn't tour, but decided to go ahead and put that out.
And it is an indie exclusive as well. There's some colored vinyl variants that the indie stores will get a hold of.
That's right.
Cool.
Ditto for the Fleet Foxes, new record from them. And you'll have an indie exclusive of that. Green Day, a reissue, the 20th anniversary reissue of Insomniac. And the big record this week, really big, Chris Cornell. No one sings like you anymore. It's a all covers. It's all covers album. This is not stuff culled from his other records. This is something he was working on before he passed away. And yeah, lots of anticipation for this. And for indie stores, there's also a bonus poster available.
Oh, cool.
The first set of these to go out there. So look to Radio Wasteland to have some of those for you as well.
All right, Ken. Well, thank you very much again for checking in with us, and keep healthy and stay on the right side of the flip as we'll get going here.
Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
Have a good week, sir. We'd like to take a moment to thank all of you again for watching the record show here on our Radio Wasteland YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so yet, just offer a gentle reminder to make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bells for notification. While you're at it, feel free to leave us a comment or two on our videos. Let us know how we're doing. Speaking of comments, we got one on a show a couple of weeks back asking for a list of my top 10 favorite albums. Well, Rick, be careful what you ask for. Not such a small task, by the way, when you've got such a wide range of musical tastes to draw from. My tastes, by the way, have really evolved over the years. As a high schooler in the late 70s and early 80s and into my college years, I transferred from kind of a little bit of a heavier metal hard rock at the time to the more alternative. So my taste in music kind of swings with that. And as I grow older, it continues to evolve with both new music and rediscovering some older stuff that I may have overlooked in my misspent youth. So in choosing the top 10 albums, I'm going to exclude for the time being soundtracks, although you're going to be probably a little angry with one of the choices after saying that. But I'm also going to go for the album as a whole. I have a favorite group. I have 2 or 3 favorite groups. I have favorite songs. But in looking for a list of top 10 favorite albums, I'm looking at what are my favorite as far as the album in its entirety. Songs that flow well from one to another, themes that continue through, maybe some sort of narrative that comes through on this, or a concept album of the sorts. Or maybe it's just a collection of songs that go great and make a great album. Either way, that's kind of how I'm approaching this with the top 10. So at number 10 on the list is one from the boys from Philly, the Dead Milkmen and Beelzebubba. They're funny, they're loud, they're fast, they're violent, they're my band. That's according to Jim Whalewander, former Detroit Tiger, and to some extent, I guess I do agree with him. Now, I was in college, working in college radio when this hit, and Punk Rock Girl stormed the college radio charts. It's just a fun song and a fun album. Now, adding to this is the fact that I have a lot of the goodies that come along with this that they sent us at the radio station at the time, like the Punk Rock Girl cutouts and some of the press kits that went along with this. But Dead Milkmen aren't for everyone. They are very, very punky. They get a little offensive at times, especially in today's PC world, but this is a fun album to have. For number 9 and 8, we're going to dip back a little bit further into the hard rock category. Now, for a time, I worked for a rock station. And now I guess it would be called classic rock, but back in the late 80s, it was just plain old straight up rock and roll. Van Halen's 1984 came out as I was finished with high school. I had to stop and think there for a moment. And not yet quite in college. So I was in that transformative era between my harder rock days and what would ultimately become alternative and punk, like you saw with the Dead Milkmen. But 1984 was just kind of a right album at the right time as I was younger. And I know at the time I had a lot of friends who were just diehard Van Halen fans, and the introduction of the synthesizers and keyboards threw them for a loop. I actually kind of dug it and thought that it was a cool direction for Van Halen to go. Ultimately, you know what happened. This is one of their biggest sellers, and you might as well jump. It's one of their biggest. Following that, right at number 8, is another high school favorite. It's tough to see in my poly sleeve, but that's AC/DC's Back in Black. Again, as a teenager, this was music that was just really, really pushing and driving and made you feel good, I guess. I don't want to say too aggressive, but it was just good hard rock music for someone in their late teens. And discovering this, along with the likes of Quiet Riot and Def Leppard and Judas Priest, just was a great, great time to be listening to music in my younger days. But Back in Black was an album that kind of stuck with me just for its overall, I guess, consistency. I don't want to use that or make it sound like an insult, but AC/DC has been a very consistent band. And Back in Black really kind of set the stage for that consistency throughout. Okay, for number 7, we're also going to go back to 1984. This is the Kinks' Word of Mouth. Now, the Kinks have been around for a long time, and they're one of those bands that have really evolved through the years, starting off as kind of that bluesy Brit act, and then into the 80s, kind of, again, like Van Halen, leaning on that more synthesized sound, but not losing their rock and roll roots. Word of Mouth is on my list because it was an album that I felt was important at times growing up. There's just some great songs on here, like Do It Again. Summer's Gone is actually just kind of a very depressing song, but one that really kind of speaks to a lot of folks, myself included. Then Word of Mouth and Good Day and Living on a Thin Line really kind of round this out. And that's why this is on here. I just think that the songs in total make the Kinks' Word of Mouth just a great album. So just before the halfway point at number 6 is a band that I discovered rather late. Tripping Daisy kind of came after my college radio days and a little bit before I started paying a little more attention to music. You know, that area of adulthood where the kids are younger and you're trying to concentrate on them. But I Am an Elastic Firecracker was something that I picked up early on after we opened up our record store. And I'd heard of Tripping Daisy and was familiar with them to some extent, but had never really gotten into them until I got a copy of this. Now, my copy is a little bit beat up, but finding this is a rarity. And when you do, they're a little on the pricey side. So regardless of the wear and tear on the cover and a little bit of pops here and there on the album, this is one I stick with because consistently, again, songs throughout are just great, especially when you get into the likes of Piranha or Trip Along. These are just cool alternative jam songs, and I really dig Trippin' Daisy. Will I upgrade if I find one? You bet. So at the halfway point, I'm going to go back to some heavy metal. Black Sabbath's Volume 4. Okay, why not Paranoid? Why not some of the other earlier Sabbath? This one, I think, consistently all through and through has songs that make this an overall top album. I do like Paranoid, and I do like even some of the Dio stuff into Mob Rules. But Volume 4 from the Ozzy era really holds together well in total as an album. And again, that's why we're putting this list together. Wheels of Confusion, Snowblind, Cornucopia, and Under the Sun, I think, are all great songs and very indicative of the way Sabbath was moving in this era. Now, other Ozzy albums from this era, like Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die, I think are great records also. But for some reason, I really only like one side of each of those records. I think if they could combine them, they'd make a perfect album. And that one, Never Say Technical Ecstasy, would be on this list. But as it stands, Volume 4 sits firmly at number 5 for me here on my top 10. So number 4 is likely going to tick a few people off because I know that there is some animosity held toward greatest hits albums from time to time. But REM's Eponymous, I think, does deserve a spot on my top 10 and possibly yours if you dig REM. REM has a lot of great albums, especially their earlier ones. When they first started cutting it into the alternative music scene and into college radio, there was no escaping some of their early stuff. It was great sounding stuff. But on the radio, an album like this, and this came out when I was working in radio, made it just a real easy go-to. And I'm not saying that this is on my list because of an act of convenience of grabbing an REM album and playing whatever you want off of it at any given time, but because it's such a great collection of music of a lot of their earlier hits. They split this up onto instead of side 1 and side 2, it's early and late. So the early stuff includes things like Gardening at Night, South Central Rain, Don't Go Back to Rockville, personal favorite, Can't Get There From Here. And the later stuff, although late in this era, things like Driver 8, Fall on Me, The One I Love, and Finest Work Song. And of course, it's The End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine. So while I know greatest hits albums can be a little bit taboo for some to speak of, in cases like REM, Eponymous, or something like The Cure, Standing on a Beach, the singles, I think they make great additions, and that's why this is on my list firmly at number 4. Okay, so for those of you that know me, you're saying, okay, why isn't this list chock full of Rush albums? You look around, I do enjoy Rush, but again, we're looking at this as a total of all the albums, and I do have all the Rush albums, and I do love all of my Rush albums, but to make this list, I had to really stop and think about what stands out as a whole. So when you think of that, you're going to think 2112. Again, one of their, not their first as far as the longer narrative songs go, but the one that really broke through for Rush was the song 2112, the 7-part opus on side 1 of this, makes this album what it is. Now, the side B, when you get things like Passage to Bangkok and Tears and Something for Nothing, are great songs also. But the weight of 2112 is enough to carry this full forward. And when I play this, I do flip it and play the other side and enjoy it really just as much. So what is in the top 2 spots? This was a tough one as well because I do enjoy Floyd and I've got a large Floyd collection. You can't go wrong with The Wall. You can't go wrong with Dark Side of the Moon, as we mentioned. And quite frankly, the toss-up for inclusion was between Wish You Were Here and Animals. Now, Animals is a great album, and I've got a lot of great memories of listening to that in my youth. That was a go-to album for so many times. But when it comes down to it, I think Wish You Were Here holds together better as a full album. Okay, and again, I know where Dark Side is and The Wall, but kind of like where I am with Zeppelin, a lot of those get a little bit of overkill. Not to say that Floyd's Wish You Were Here doesn't, but there are so many other great cuts on this that help bring this and elevate it up to that number 2 spot on here. By the way, I'm pretty proud to have a half-speed mastered version in the collection of this. I do have the regular version back there as well, one of my originals with the postcards. So finally, number 1, and this will come as no surprise to anyone who knows me, is Rush's Permanent Waves. This was the album that really got me not into Rush, but really more heavily involved in music at a very, very early age. The Spirit of Radio as a single helped propel this album, but it was also something that was very inspirational to me coming out of high school and then eventually ending up in radio in college. I know that sounds a little cliche, but that's how this works sometimes. But this album for me is a very important one. That's why it hits that number 1 spot on the list. Songs like Free Will, Entre Nous is on here. Natural Science is just a great, great tune. And even though Spirit of Radio is my favorite, right up there is the tune Jacob's Ladder. And if you can find a time to listen to that in the early summer when a thunderstorm is rolling around outside and listening to Jacob's Ladder at the same time, the experience is quite phenomenal. Okay, so since Permanent Waves is my number 1 album, of course I'm going to have multiple copies of that. But just how multiple, you ask? Okay, well, I've got my original copy. This was the one that I bought in probably 81, 82. It is a little beat up, but still kind of playable in spots. But that's the original, and that's why I'm keeping it. Add into that, I've got a playable copy. It's also a first pressing early one. I have got a Canadian copy. I'm not going to pull it out, but this is on Anthem Records. Picked that up in Toronto a couple of years ago. I have got the 200-gram reissue of Permanent Waves that was put out, so this is a good listen as well. Let's add into this the original master recording from Mo-Fi version of Permanent Waves. Had to work hard to get this one, but man, does this sound fantastic. And then finally, because I'm a sucker for it, last year when that came out, I've got the Super Deluxe box set of Permanent Waves. It has some live recordings. It's got the booklet in here, and it's got the remastered album and all sorts of extra goodies. This was the one time I'm going to splurge because it is that number 1 album. Well, Rick, thanks again for that comment. It was fun, albeit a little bit difficult, to get this list put together of the top 10. If you have any other questions or comments about what we do here at the store, or maybe even some more of my other personal favorites, please be sure to leave them down in the comment section below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notifications bell, please. Finally, today on the Record Show, we'd like to talk a little bit more about how some artists grow and change over the years. We'd mentioned that for some, consistency is good, say like AC/DC, for example, is a dependable sound that you hear from album to album. Others, say like Rush, grow and change over the years as their musical stylings or influences change. And that's not always a bad thing. This takes us to legendary guitarist Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple and Rainbow. He's always had an affinity for what he'd called medieval folk music. And back in 1989, he met a woman named Candace Knight, who had approached him for an autograph during a Rainbow show. She'd worked for a radio station and was always a big Rainbow fan. The two became friends and then later started a relationship, and then in 2011 released their first album of medieval folk music. Released just this week is an album called Nature's Light by Blackmore's Night. This is their 11th studio album together, and it is quite the departure from the normal fare that you'd expect from a guitarist of Ritchie Blackmore's stature. In fact, the hype sticker even says, Ritchie Blackmore, Candace Knight, and the Minstrels are back with their first studio album in 6 years. escape to another time with this mystical music inspired by the magic of nature. And I'll tell you what, for those of you expecting to hear Ritchie Blackmore searing guitar on this, you're going to be a little surprised. Not that that's a bad thing, mind you. You just have to be into medieval folk rock music.
Come, my dear, I'll tell a tale through the winter's frosty gale, when the bells refused to ring and the angels wouldn't sing. Somewhere in the dark of night was a single shining light. Still I can remember once upon December. Come, my dear, I'll tell.
Thanks for watching The Record Show. If you haven't done so yet, please make sure to subscribe to the Radio Wasteland Records YouTube channel. And be sure to hit that notifications bell so you'll be alerted every time we upload new content.